So in this section of The Giver, this is definitely the climax. So after Jonas saw his dad release, which is just euthanize a baby, that Jonas is extremely upset, and for good reason, because he actually understands death now, understands the impact of death. That's banned. We read that in school. Yeah, it's banned in a lot of places, especially as fascism rises, when we have white Christian nationalism rising in the US, that we see a crackdown on this, especially when you have a main character that is taught to not trust their society and actively resist it. But the whole process and like desire to want to ban things is so childish to me that they're like, it's always people who are like, my parental rights, I don't want you teaching this to my kids. It's like, okay, so now you're removing all of the books from the library. How is that not infringing on the parental rights of other parents to actually let their kids read this stuff? Yeah. It's so lame. Okay. So when Jonas finds that out, he is extremely upset, and the Giver is comforting him, and he's like, I don't want to be by my dad now. And yeah, that makes sense. You just saw him euthanize a newborn, and he's very upset because he said, he lied to me. The Giver says it's what he was told to do, and he knows nothing else. So this also reveals how when there is effective brainwashing and capturing the minds of people, that they don't have really a sense of autonomy, and how they just act in ways that are contradictory, where lies don't mean anything because there's this larger good, supposedly, that they are supporting, that as long as they are falling in line with the structure and will of the state, that they are able to act in ways that are unethical, but they don't view it that way. And how when people are kept ignorant of not having collective knowledge, collective memory, history be taught to people, like as we were just talking about not being taught history in the US, that it allows the same atrocities to continue. And that people can be advocating for these atrocities, as we see. He brings up Fiona, the girl that he has a crush on, and he's like, oh, she's going to learn how to do the releasing thing and euthanizing people because she works for the senior center, or like the House of Old is what they call it. And so then he has dinner with the Giver, and he's like, I don't want to live like this. Essentially, he's like, I don't want to live here in this place. It's really difficult to actually feel emotions, understand history, and be around all of these people that don't. This is what the Giver says. The worst part of holding the memories is not the pain, it's the loneliness of it. Memories need to be shared. And then Jonas says, I've started to share them with you, Jonas said, trying to cheer him. That's true. And having you here with me over the past year has made me realize that things must change. For years, I've felt that they should, but it seemed so hopeless. Now, for the first time, I think there may be a way, the Giver said slowly. And you brought it to my attention, barely, he glanced at the clock, 2 hours ago. Jonas watched him and listened. So they then start planning Jonas leaving. We saw how with the previous Giver, who was the daughter of the receiver, scratch that. The previous receiver, Rosemary, was the daughter of the Giver, and that when she was released, because she filed for release after learning about all of the atrocities that human history contains, which, yeah, that makes sense. That when she died, all of her memories that had been transferred to her from the giver then were let out and disseminated essentially to the people. And then there was this whole process of brainwashing again and like wiping people's memories so that they don't have a memory of this instance happening. And the giver is saying, like, I'm going to try to give you all of these memories or a lot of memories before you leave so that when you leave, you actually exit the borders of this land, that people will then have memory. They'll have collective memory and history, and then it will fundamentally change the society where they will actually have individuality, a desire to have control over their own lives, like marry who they want to marry, have the career that they want, rather than everything being assigned to them by the government. Jonas wishes that the giver could go with him, and this is such a revolutionary thing to do that, like, reading this as a kid, that's probably why, like, I mean, I mentioned it earlier, but why they ban it is that you see this kid who is a hero acting alone against the society that he grows up in, against their control, and is escaping and actively restoring their humanity. So the giver said that he is going to stay because when Jonas leaves, there's going to be a lot of chaos, that people will be overwhelmed with all of these memories and feelings, and the giver will be there to help them through it, essentially like therapizing, guiding them through it. Okay, I'm finding this part that I was wanting to talk about. Oh, yeah. The giver says, I've been a little selfish. I haven't given uh, his favorite memory to Jonas. He said, I wanted to keep it for myself to the last. And Jonas is like, that's okay. You should keep it. And he was describing how when he first was exhibiting these traits of being capable of being a receiver, that he would hear things. And he then is describing it. When I was just a boy, younger than you, it began to come to me, but it wasn't the seeing beyond for me, like how Jonas was seeing colors first. It was different. For me, it was hearing beyond. Jonas frowned, trying to figure that out. What did you hear? He asked. Music, the giver said, smiling. I began to hear something truly remarkable, and it is called music. I'll give you some before I go. Jonas shook his head emphatically. No, giver, he said. I want you to keep that, to have with you when I'm gone. Like, you could give him a little bit of music. Music is delightful. But yeah, living in a society where there isn't music, among many other things. So now Jonas is going home. He is planning on leaving. His parents, he knows that they're going to be irritated, but that they won't care a ton because they don't actually know what true love means or loss. They plan it out, and Jonas said that he was going to take Gabriel, the baby that his dad had been taking care of, that was staying with them. Normally they don't have like 3 children to a family, but the dad, as a nurturer of these infants, got permission to take this baby home to give some extra care, and he still wasn't like measuring up to their arbitrary standards of fitness. So there's like very clear references to eugenics in this book. That Jonas is like, no, he's wonderful. I love him. I don't want you to release him, which is euthanize him, because he isn't, some nights he doesn't sleep through the night. And then Jonas learns that the previous receiver who was released, Rosemary, is the daughter of the giver. Okay, and so then the next night, Jonas was forced to flee. He goes on his bike. He is using, well, I guess it's not his bike. He's using his dad's bike, I think, because it actually has like the baby carrier. Yeah, because the next day, Gabriel, the baby, is scheduled to be released. And this is what Father says, Jonas's dad. "It's bye-bye to you, Gabe, in the morning," Father said in his sweet sing-song voice, which is just very terrified and horrified. Jonas reached the opposite side of the river, stopped briefly, and looked back. The community where his entire life had been lay below. Nope. The community where his entire life had been lived lay behind him now, sleeping. At dawn, the orderly, disciplined life he had always known would continue again without him. The life where nothing was ever expected, or inconvenient, or unusual. The life without color, pain, or past. He pushed firmly again at the pedal with his foot and continued riding along the road. It was not safe to spend time looking back. He thought of the rules he had broken so far, enough that if he were caught, now he would be condemned. It also is talking about how there is a morality to breaking rules and norms that are inherently oppressive. Then he lists off all of his supposed crimes, which is really just like getting food and leaving. So he understands that like time is running out, they are getting cold, and they're tired and hungry after they go through their food. So Jonas is giving Gabriel memories of like food and rest to help him get through it. Then there's this part. The most terrifying thing was the planes. By now, days had passed. Planes meaning like airplanes. Jonas no longer knew how many. The journey had become automatic. The sleep by day, hidden in underbrush and trees, the finding of water, the careful division of scraps of food, augmented by what he could find in the fields, and the endless, endless miles on the bicycle by night. So he starts to get used to it. At first, he was extremely exhausted. His body wasn't used to that kind of exercise. And then he's getting stronger as time goes on. He can also see Gabriel's hair now, since he sees color, that he has golden curls. And then it ends with this. As he pedaled through the nights, through isolated landscape now, with the communities far behind, and no sign of human habitation around him or ahead, he was constantly vigilant, looking for the nearest hiding place should the sound of engines come. But the frequency of the planes diminished. They came less often, and flew, when they did come, less slowly, as if the search had become haphazard and no longer hopeful. Finally, there was an entire day and night when they did not come at all. So he's like, wow, I'm actually able to get away with this. What I really enjoy about this section is that it shows how the exchange of memory, sharing in experiences, trauma, joy that the giver and Jonas have together, that they have a way more profound connection to each other and love for one another than Jonas does with his parents. And that is, by nature, what happens when people are engaging in these pro-social activities of actually humanizing one another, prioritizing our humanity. And how this collective memory is a burden in a lot of ways when we learn about history, like as we're kids growing up learning about all of the atrocities in the world. It's like, oh, why do they always show us fairy tales when the world is nothing like this? Like, why are we always being lied to? But how, when we actually are able to confront these atrocities, that we then can act. And this is why societies today keep their populaces very ignorant. It is a weapon in order to preserve their control over people. So that's also why it's probably banned. But I really love this book. I felt like, I've said this before, but I really felt like reading it for the first time growing up. I think I was like 7 or something. And it gave me the understanding for the first time that there may be adults and authority figures that you can't trust, that there are people who are telling you what to do that may not be good. They might not be asking you to do things that are moral, and that there is a responsibility when you are able to see these things for yourself, the kind of oppression and disparities, discrimination that exist, that we have a responsibility to do something about it and act. Okay. And then we're going to read chapters 22 and 23, and then it will be done. And then we're going to move on to the next book. So I have 4 books that we're choosing between, and you all can let me know in this chat. I have also posted a poll on YouTube on the channel for the next book that we're reading. So I've chosen 4, mostly because the YouTube poll only allows 4 options. But the 4 that I have chosen are The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, 1984 by George Orwell, and All Boys Aren't Blue by George Johnson. So if any of those sound interesting, let me know. You can tell me here, vote on YouTube, whatever floats your boat. I think all of these books are very pertinent to current events. I was going to read The Outsiders next because my rationale was like, oh, we're going to go from least difficult reading and build up reading levels. But with the urgency of this moment, I think we need to jump into some of the more advanced reading and subject matter.